some major foreign policy things are happening, and I just want to touch up on them. First of all, Donald Trump is not only ramping up the boat attacks in the Caribbean, not the vote attacks, those are happening as well, but the boat attacks in the Caribbean with the notion that these drug cartels are now domestic terror organizations, and Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, and his regime is also a domestic terror organization, and this order of a blockade of all oil going from Venezuela to Iran or whatever other countries of the world, that something is happening in South America, especially with an armada that is building a blockade. So with the boat strikes and the blockade, Donald Trump needs to, at this point, ask Congress for war authorization, because it has passed the 60 days where the president can, order and execute military operations that are less than 60 days without congressional authorization. But that time has passed. And so Donald Trump needs to get congressional authorization if it's going to do anything else with Venezuela and its military operation. And it seems more and more that it's going to do that. And you would wonder why Donald Trump would do this. And I always go back to the Gallup poll presidential tracker that has tracked presidential ratings from Truman onwards. And it shows that when there's a war, the presidential polls nationally go up. When there is, especially with war with congressional authorization, that something like that happened after 9/11, Bush's ratings went from the mid-50s to 89%. And that was a huge event, a massive, tragic event that happened, an attack on American homeland for the first time since Pearl Harbor. And that was a big, big deal. And it remains a big deal. And so that Donald Trump needs to get war authorization, because Bush got war authorization from Congress. Now, whether that war with Iraq and then Afghanistan, especially with Iraq, was really a war, a forever war for nothing, it turned out to be that. Notwithstanding, it was authorized by Congress. What Donald Trump is doing right now isn't authorized by Congress. But in a few hours, Donald Trump is going to speak, and I believe it's got to do with foreign affairs. It's going to have to do with his blockade. He's probably going to say that he's going to ask Congress for war power authorization. He's also probably going to go on after the police state that is happening in the United States, about the fentanyl and the people who are being pursued by ICE and DHS. He's going to spread the narrative that is ugly again about immigrant communities across the United States, when we still know that over 70% of the people on average who are being detained do not have criminal records. So Donald Trump's regime is doing a hatchet job, and he's going to connect it to a national security issue with Venezuela sending in fentanyl. And when the drug coming from South America and then going to Europe is actually cocaine and not fentanyl, and then create a false premise for war authorization by Congress. The only reason I can think about it is that he needs to divert somebody's attention, the American people's attention, from the cost of living, from the expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies, from the huge economic shocks that it's going to feel when the Supreme Court invalidates the tariffs, when there is economic chaos in the next coming months and years. Donald Trump is going to throw a war into it, as part of his orchestra pit politics theory that he has embraced from Roger Ailes. I mean, I can't, that little bit doesn't leave my head. But this is a big, throwing a big rock into a small pond and causing a big ripple, because it is a national security matter over which Donald Trump has plenary authority per the immunity case from last year or 2 years ago, Trump v. United States. And so it sort of sweeps on into the immigration raids as well. He's going to justify the indiscriminate police state, the surveillance state that he has been implementing in American cities by saying that it is this national security emergency that I'm dealing with drugs and criminal gangs invading our cities and all the criminals and the rapists. And it's the same diatribe to rationalize what he's doing with the police state. And I can't see him not do a little bit of blame shifting onto immigrant communities when he speaks about this in a few hours. So that's about that war. Then there's the other war that he said he was going to end on day one of taking office, which he has not been able to end. And with Donald Trump's new White House national security strategy and Donald Trump's approved 28-point peace plan for Ukraine, I think Ukraine and Europe are pretty clear about what Donald Trump intends to do with Ukraine, with Europe, and with Russia. Donald Trump is going to take Russia's side. Donald Trump is going to break apart alliances, or at least not honor them and just sit on them, like the NATO alliance and the Article 5 necessity if Russia were to declare war on European countries other than its invasion of Ukraine. But now Zelensky and Europe firmly know that their well-being, other than ethnic, racial quotas and exemptions provided to white people coming over from any part of the world to the United States, apart from that, Ukraine is not going to get any help from the United States. And the United States is not a broker of peace for Ukraine. The United States is aligned with Russia. And the United States is also not, in that realm, aligned with Europe. And so Europe is getting the message. I have been talking about this message for over a year, that Ukraine, Donald Trump is not your friend. Ukraine, you need to focus on fortifying with Europe. Europe, you need to build up your military, build up your defense infrastructure independent of American forces there under NATO. And you need to be able to defend yourselves and defend Ukraine's front lines. And that needs to become Europe's priority, not because it is primarily Europe's responsibility to hold up the liberal, peaceful world order, but it is also because the United States is currently derelict in its duty to uphold the liberal order and make sure war doesn't break out in Europe, and by way of it, throw the entire world out of balance and throw the economic systems into disarray when the world is already struggling with the inflation from 5 years ago. Remember, America talks about inflation in smaller increments because America, thanks to Joe Biden, came out of the COVID depths and became a resilient economy and the envy of the world when it came to recovery from COVID. The world is still dealing with that inflationary impact. And the world is still dealing with the oil market ups and downs that happened during COVID, and it's still having an impact on prices around the world. And that is part of the reason why you have India buying cheap oil from Russia, and in a way, funding Russia to do what it wants to do with its other foreign policy priorities and not getting in its way. And so Donald Trump is relinquishing America's role as a peace mediator, as the indispensable nation that keeps the world working and keeps the global economy stabilized and keeping the peace of the world stabilized. Donald Trump is actively now on the side of Russia, doing exactly the opposite of what he needs to be doing, which is support Ukraine and insist that Russia leave Ukraine alone and leave its territories and go back to what was Russian territory before Russia's invasion of Crimea. That needs to be the baseline. And if Russia doesn't accept that, then there needs to be European troops on the ground, and there needs to be an apparatus that stops Russia from killing Ukrainians left, right, and center, from school children to hospitals to churches to housing residences and civilian populations. So these two war things are happening right now, and these developments are going to have an impact on America's clout as well as America's power, both regionally and globally, but also domestically. Because if Donald Trump uses the national security strategy to start going after immigrant communities, and that somehow becomes unreviewable by the courts, there's no telling how far Donald Trump can go to connect immigrant communities to violence, to the national security strategy agenda, and therefore not be held accountable for the constitutional violations currently taking place in America on Americans and persons who are legally present in America. With that said, keep your eyes on the ball, keep your eyes on the wars, keep your eyes out for ICE and DHS, know your rights, have your IDs with you at all times, your state ID, copy of your passport. And if it was me walking around just without wanting to be heckled, if you have your citizenship certificate or if you have a copy of your birth certificate if you were born in the United States, those come in handy. And when you present that, if they don't take that, you call 911, because the local police are required to look at your information and verify whether you are who you say you are. Remember that local law enforcement is there to protect you, and they should be there to protect you and protect your constitutional rights if they are being overreached and if they are being your rights are being impinged by the federal agents and the federal government. With that said, thank you for listening. Please stay safe. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Share this information so other people may also be aware of what's happening. With that said, thank you so much. Take care.